Scrum is an agile project management methodology often used to manage complex software and product development, using iterative and incremental practices. In this game, you will get to play different Scrum roles, namely, Scrum Master, Product Owner and Development Team. The objective of the game is to provide you with an in-depth understanding of the Scrum methodology by managing a software development project. In the game, you are required to create a website for selling books, which is accomplished by fulfilling a series of requirements, also known as user stories. This game is called Scrum-X. It is created using Microsoft Excel. At the top of the opening page, there is a process flow diagram illustrating the Scrum framework. If you are lost, click on the green box in the process flow to get instructions on what to do next. There are audio instructions throughout the game. Increase the volume of your speakers if necessary. If you are new to Scrum, it is advisable to spend some time learning about the different roles, ceremonies, and artifacts of Scrum before playing the game. You can do so by clicking on the words and pictures in the home page.
I am the product owner. I am responsible for bridging the gap between the requirements for the system being developed are listed in a burn-down chart shows the amount of work remaining across.
Situations in the form of multiple-choice questions will pop up during the game. You have to answer the questions to proceed to the next stage. Try to answer the questions to the best of your ability. Your answer will affect the overall performance of the Scrum Master. The first step of the game is to select your development team members. You will be able to change your team members at the beginning of each sprint during the course of the game. Read the background profiles of each member carefully before making your decision. You need to select one architect, one developer and one QA. After deciding on your team members, proceed to sprint planning by clicking on the sprint planning box. At the sprint planning meeting, you will find the requirements for the creation of the website, listed in the form of user stories. A collection of user stories is called the product backlog. New stories can be introduced into the product backlog anytime throughout the life cycle of the project. You will have to estimate the story points for each story listed in the product backlog. A story point is a quantitative indication of the size and complexity of each story. It ranges from a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being the least complex and 6 being the most complex. To estimate the story points, it is recommended that you play the planning poker game in a small group. Read the instructions for the planning poker game by moving your cursor over the user story heading. After you have estimated all the story points, take a look at your estimation accuracy, indicated at the top. The accuracy of your estimation will influence the sprint execution performance. You may make adjustment to story points to improve the accuracy. Next, click Prioritize Product Backlog box. The product owner is responsible for prioritizing the stories in order of importance that matters to the client. In the game, however, the prioritization of user stories is done randomly without considering the logical sequence of development. After prioritizing the stories, you will now play the role of the development team to select a number of stories to be completed within that sprint. It is up to you to decide how many stories you'd like to select, although the game allows you to select up to 10 stories to complete per sprint. There is a tally of the total number of stories and story points selected for that sprint. The total story points, also known as the velocity, which is a simple and powerful way to measure the rate at which the development team consistently delivers business value. In this game, each sprint consists of 5 working days, and there are no weekends. After several sprints, the velocity usually stabilizes when the development team learns through experience their rate of delivering stories. After you have selected the stories to be completed within a sprint, you will have to break it down into tasks to form the sprint backlog. This is done automatically in the game by clicking Create Sprint Backlog. In practice, the development team has to identify the tasks necessary to complete each story during the sprint planning meeting. The sprint backlog defines the tasks that need to be completed for that sprint. Next, you will be directed to the daily Scrum meeting, where you can see an overview of the number of stories in 3 categories: product backlog, in progress, and done, aka completed. During the daily Scrum meeting, the development team will answer 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What will you do today? Are there any impediments in your way? A sprint burn-down chart is available on the right-hand side. It illustrates the amount of work remaining at a specific point in time in the progress of the development team in reducing this amount of work. The straight line in blue represents the ideal progress the team should make to complete all the stories selected within the sprint. During sprint execution, the actual progress, represented by a green line, will be shown on the chart. If the green line is above the blue line, it means you are going at a slower pace than expected and may not be able to complete all the committed stories. If the green line is below the blue line, it shows that you are progressing at a faster pace than anticipated and likely to finish earlier, but wasting the remaining days within the sprint. The key here is to discover the team's velocity in delivering an optimum amount of work within a sprint. The sprint execution is simulated using the popular Minesweeper game with different levels of difficulty. The duration of the sprint is fixed, also known as time-boxed. So with a higher velocity value, there is a higher demand on the development team to complete the task within the sprint. In the game, this is translated into more mines planted into the minefield that the player has to locate. As such, it is more challenging to win the Minesweeper game with a higher velocity value unless the team is highly skilled with the game. You are given 2 chances to complete the Minesweeper game. The second attempt will be more challenging than the first with more mines to clear. After each day, your performance with the Minesweeper game will determine the progress made on the burn-down chart. You have to play the Minesweeper game 5 times to simulate the 5 days to complete a sprint. You may encounter impediments during the sprint. If there are impediments, you will be notified and a pop-up will appear, requesting you to make a decision or answer a question. Upon completion of the sprint, the number of outstanding hours of work remaining on the burn-down chart will influence the success rate of stories selected in that sprint. If there is close to 0 hour of work remaining, all the stories selected for the sprint will most likely be accepted as done. Next, proceed to the sprint review and sprint retrospective meeting by clicking on the sprint review box. In the sprint review, the product owner reviews the completeness of the stories and decides whether to accept or reject them. Completed stories will be classified as done, while rejected stories will be returned to the product backlog. When a story is classified as done, it is a potentially shippable product. The product burn-down chart shows how many stories you have yet to complete and the number of sprints that have been conducted so far. Your objective is to complete all the stories using the least number of sprints. The team effectiveness is a measure of the success rate of the stories selected in a sprint. The Scrum Master performance shows the percentage of multiple-choice questions answered correctly. During the sprint retrospective meeting, the team will reflect on the decisions made during the sprint to assess what was done well, what can be improved, and what should be avoided for subsequent sprints. In the game, you'll review the decisions made and understand the rationale behind them. When you have finished reviewing the sprint retrospective, you may proceed to the next sprint cycle. At this point, you have the option of changing your team members, or you may go directly to the sprint planning stage. New stories may be introduced at the sprint planning stage. If so, you will have to estimate the story points before proceeding. In IT project, new requirements and change requests are constantly being introduced throughout the project lifecycle. Unlike conventional project management methodology which needs all requirements to be made known at the beginning, and discourages changes during project execution, the Scrum methodology on the other hand, welcomes changes throughout the project by reprioritizing the requirements after each sprint. The game ends when you have successfully completed all the stories in the product backlog. If you are keen to use this game for your course, please contact Dr. Lee at sds1733p@gmail.com. Thank you.